It's so cool that Christmas and New Year's were on a Thursday this year, so that everybody got, well, who didn't have to work yesterday. Court night.
Yeah. How about yourself? Did you have a good break?
I didn't do anything. I watched
Good.
movies.
Yeah.
I watched
That's the best.
movies.
That's the best thing.
And then a bunch of people like came near where I was and started shooting off a bunch of fireworks. And I was like a totally curmudgeonly old lady, like, quit that over there. I am watching this movie.
Yeah. Oh,
Hey,
you gotta go.
Stuart,
What kind of stuff were you watching?
Jimmy.
The holiday stuff?
No, I watched this movie, Eden. It was really good. Hey, what's the matter? This movie called Eden with Jude Law.
Okay.
And it's a true story. It's about these people who escaped Germany like in 3032 and went to the Galapagos Islands.
Mm-hmm.
And they started having this crazy like psychological game of who was going to outlast the others because it was a totally undeveloped place where even water was difficult. Anyway, you need to see it. It's a good psychological, and it's a true story. Really
Oh,
a weird one.
I don't Eden is what it's called. The Chula. I'll look for that. I'll write
Yeah,
it down.
Jude Law, he normally plays kind of a wimpy dude. He was like a naked, philosophical badass guy. Hi, Steph,
Oh,
Susan,
buddy. So wonderful to see everybody.
Rebecca. Y'all, I have to thank you guys so much. I did a GoFundMe, Walter, because I've been having these financial issues, and I was
Uh-huh.
really afraid. I my storage unit stuff was due, and I didn't have the money at all. So Lev promoted my GoFundMe, and I got the money. So I'm just like
Oh, nice.
so grateful to my Substack family. I mean, it was just a miracle. And there's
Yeah.
so many of you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, everybody's facing headwinds this year, and I've had so much support. Hi, Karen. I see Karen's here, and Susan. Thank you, Kimmy. Wonderful to see everybody. But yeah, it's like, and I know I've got so grateful because I have other people that are in the good financial situation and they're helping out because they're seeing what we're trying to do here on Substack. And I know so many people are just so frustrated and just seeing any kind of movement and any momentum building. And I feel like a lot of momentum is building and just keeping us afloat. It takes a lot of time to have these conversations and keep people organized. And yeah, all the tough times. So thanks to all the wonderful people for helping out. We're going to keep going. We're going to win. We're going to restore a society where everybody gets to prosper instead of just like five guys that are the worst people in the whole country. So that's what we're working towards.
Guys, oh my gosh. I've been audio booking Malcolm Nance. Hold on. What was it called? Help, I've lost him. Yikes. Malcolm Nance is just amazing. If you guys don't follow him, he has worked in counterintelligence and he's written several books. And I don't know why they didn't get more attention, but the one that I'm listening to now is The Plot to Destroy Democracy. And it really talks about the Russian interference in the 2016 election. And it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
How was it not? It was almost intentionally not reported on to
Yes.
me because of the Julian Assange. Like, I think that it was all orchestrated again by Russia to keep our attention completely diverted.
Yeah. And that's been ongoing. And there's a couple of things you said. Just our gatekeeper system is all owned by the same oligarchs that own everything else. So the stories that they're allowed to be shown, are not the ones that disrupt their power grab, and what we're seeing, I mean, it's really easy to see what's going on. We got corrupt people that are, mortgaging the next 100 years of this nation to pay themselves trillions of dollars, and so then our children are going to spend the eternity of their lives paying back all this money that went to these awful people, unless we vote in better people and seize all their assets and cancel our debt that way, which is what I think we have to do.
I'm also wondering too, if this all is over, how can we? Is it going to be possible for us to recoup any of this money that's been completely stolen?
Yeah, I think it
Do you
will.
think?
I think, yeah. I mean, that's in the future, but I mean, it's just sitting there. The cash is sitting there. I mean, government seize assets all the time. When you're involved in criminal behavior, I mean, they've got. I don't know for sure what's going on with Epstein's 100 million, but I mean, there's no reason
Oh,
for I mean, the government should have seized that long ago and distributed it to all the survivors. I mean, and then the laws are probably on the books, but Then it's a matter of electing people that actually enforce them. So I'm open if we get like Letitia James for our attorney general. If we see Attorney General Letitia James, you're going to see some justice, and that's what we have to keep our minds on, because there is a way to do this. We can't fall into despair and be afraid. It's like you could actually see all this stuff get switched over pretty fast, because how long does it take? We got to break up all the monopolies, all the oligarchs, they keep reducing the number of publishers. They went from big five to big four to big three. Break that up. So now there's 1,000 book publishers, and because we have to get back to where we can't have two or three oligarchs control all narratives, because exactly like you said, they're not telling these important stories. They're letting corruption be buried. And yeah, very quickly we can get it fixed. Jack Smith would be another attorney general, I think, but
Oh,
Letitia James would be my favorite.
I have to also say that I didn't just watch Eden. I watched the full 8 hours of Jack Smith. I'm sorry,
Oh,
he is just a ninja. I mean, that's what I did
fantastic.
on New Year's. So it's so amazing. He unequivocally said that January 6th was completely orchestrated by Trump, that it was a full attempt to overthrow democracy.
Yeah.
And yeah, he he said that that Nada and the other guy who worked at Mar-a-Lago, that yeah, that it was they were intending to steal those documents. And what I understand, when I was listening to some other people today, that Trump has been selling those documents.
Yep.
That it's fairly well known that he's been selling those documents. And as I reported in my Jared Kushner piece, based on the psychological profile and behavior analysis that I did, it is almost, I would say, upper 80% that I am confident that Kushner has sold nuclear secrets, uranium enriching secrets to Saudi Arabia. I
Yeah.
believe that has already occurred.
Yeah, just the loss of life from this administration. I mean, it's just been horrific, and it remains extremely frustrating that good people, quote unquote good people that have their heads in the sand, and they're just in denial of all the people that are suffering and being tortured to death and dying because of this regime, and like the enduring things that are going to do, because they're handing over, like you said, just top secrets to just awful people, whoever can pay the most.
For
They're enabling all
money,
these things.
yeah.
Yeah. And even the pardons, like he's selling off the pardons. This president has pardoned like pedophiles. He's pardoned like these most awful people in the world, all the January 6 guys. A lot of
Oh,
those guys
January
have
6th.
turned around because they're so stupid. They thought it was like a pardon for all evil acts in the future, and they're all like back in jail now. But they've gone out and committed more crimes. I mean, it's verifiable. The news should be talking about this every day. And that's another reason we just got to. I mean, the whole mainstream media is so corrupt at this point, too. Not telling the stories, not asking the questions. They allowed all this stuff to happen. And yeah, I mean, everybody's got to wake up. It's every individual has to make up their mind and not be part of it, because it's that passive allowing it to continue that has allowed it to get this bad.
It does feel like the corporate media was. I mean, I thought that it was more of a recent thing, but listening to this thing about Malcolm Nance, I believe that this was going on in 2016. I mean, there
Yeah.
was another guy called Guccifer. Do y'all know who that is? He was a Romanian hacker, and he had hacked into the Russian stuff and was sort of uncovering that they were involved in interfering in the election. And before they didn't know who this guy was, like he was sort of a mystery guy. And then all of a sudden, Julian Assange pops onto the scene with all of his information, which made Guccifer's information null and void. But the corporate media latched onto Assange, and this
Yeah.
was as our intelligence and British intelligence and Australian intelligence had gotten, positive information that Russia was fully intentionally trying to overtake the election, and Trump was their man, that they were trying to
Yeah.
get elected.
I recalled reading years ago how some higher ups in Russia were just astonished by how much of the U.S. electoral system just relied on good faith. They were just like, "Oh yeah, people aren't going to try it," and they were just like, "Are you kidding me?" They looked at this, and repeatedly, Democrats. Thanks, they like my beanie. This is an old one, a Seeger hat. But repeatedly, Democrats, some smaller factions within the Democrats, because half the Democrats are just passive and allow this to continue too, but they've been emphasizing we need greater election security. That's another thing. The Republicans have always shot that down. They've refused to allow us to pass election security, which should say a few things. They've shot down the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act. I don't know if you've read about that, but the Voting Rights
Yeah,
Restoration Act, because essentially the original Voting Rights Act has been completely gutted by the Supreme Court going back to about 2012 or 2013. That's why we have gerrymandering. That's why they, all these attacks where they're able to toss away ballots. And I mean, voting restriction has been going on, since poll taxes, since those literacy tests. I don't know if you've ever read any of those old
right.
literacy tests. They're
Yes.
impossible. I mean, I have a degree in English, and every single question is written so that you can't possibly get it right. So that's one of the
Oh,
things
I
that
didn't know
fortifies me
that.
when I feel, oh, you should go read one of those literacy tests. They're impossible. They're not possible. It's always interpreted like however they're interpreting the answer, they can say, well, this is wrong because I intended this. I've read them. They're a mess. And so that fortifies me though, knowing that even now with all the things we're facing, we still have more power than people had 40 years ago, 50 years ago, or 100 years ago. We have more knowledge now. We have more tools like this platform here, where we're able to speak to people. But people really need to get out there and demand. And that's why I get mad at people like Adam Kinzinger. He seems to be on our side, but he voted against the Voting Rights Restoration Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act.
Did
So
he?
we can't have these people. We can't be like, oh, welcome, you're part of our group, when they're standing against the idea of ensuring that every American gets to vote and protecting our voting rights. And the reality is, half of the Democrats will not help us there. I mean, they don't stand up and fight for us. They're not calling for recounts like they should. They're not demanding. There are some that are doing good work, not all of them. And until we're unified, we remain weak. But we're getting there. We're demanding it.
Cecile just brought up this, and I saw that earlier. That oh, what's his name? The new guy on CBS. That he came on at 6:30 on the 31st, pretty much to tell us all that CBS is no longer going to use experts and educated people
Yeah. Why would
for their
anybody
news
watch?
sources. Why? When we can listen to the people and go with our feelings and report on feelings instead of facts. I thought that was insanity. Walter Cronkite, literally, wherever he is, poor man, is not a happy
Yeah.
camper.
Well, that's another thing that I've seen since I've been on Substack. And, when they did the invasion of Iran because of the enrichment facilities and things like that, one
Right.
of my friends on Substack is Robert Dana, he's a nuclear engineer. He worked in weapons in the United States, and he was just furious. He's just like, I want to come and talk because everything they're saying on the media is just wrong. He's like, and I'm like, well, what about your security clearance? He's like, don't worry, don't worry. I know what I can't say to
The
break that
language,
security clearance. I'm
right.
like, but he got on there. He's just like, they're wrong about this, and it gets really, really frustrating that
Bring
the
him over
mainstream media
here,
makes people
Walter.
less educated. Go ahead.
Bring him over here. Where is he? I want to hear what he has to
Oh,
say.
well, maybe if he shows up in the comments, if you're there, he usually says hi. But if he says hi, we can invite him on right now. He's wonderful. He's one of my best friends that I've met here in this last year, and it's just. But what's amazing is there's so many educated people out there, and it's such a relief. It's such a relief to talk to people that are educated and knowledgeable and actually have experience. And it gets so frustrating to watch the news, and it's just fools, in fancy suits, and it's like I'm the disheveled guy who actually knows a few things. And if I don't know, I actually say, I don't know. That's the difference between me and other people. And it's just sort of
Me
like,
too.
yeah, people are frustrated with it though. They can only push us so far and for so long. And I think we're at that breaking point. We just got to keep hammering at it. All the wonderful
Yeah.
people. Thanks for all the
I
hearts.
bet
You
it's
guys
so
are great.
good, you guys. Y'all are the best. Lisa. What was I going to say? Oh my God, you guys. All right, I have to show you this because nobody's talking about this. I went on to Truth Social today because I was
Oh
looking at
God,
the
really? You go
Iran.
on there?
Oh yeah, because I like to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. You know what I mean?
Oh boy.
Look at this.
Yeah.
Are y'all ready?
Oh God,
Can
she's
y'all
gonna show
see?
us. Oh man. Ugh. What the heck?
That is his AI vision of the White for the White House.
Ah, that's oh gosh. Uh,
The Washington monument is like this big, and the White House is like like this
It's
big. I'm not
insanity.
kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. He's so far
It's
off his
bad.
rocker. I mean, and he's never done anything, so I don't even listen to him anymore.
Well, I thought it was interesting because you brought up Iran, and that Iran was a huge part of my Kushner story because I was really trying to figure out the relationship of how Netanyahu and MBS, like all the three of those guys, what they have in common, and to go for Iran and not let them develop nuclear. Like, what really is the deep motivation there? And so I'm trying to figure that out. Has been interesting. And why did we really go into Iran? Like, what really was Trump's purpose for going in? So I'm really interested to hear what he has to say. But anyway, as you guys know, Trump came out today, and there were a bunch of protests in Iran. And he came out today and said that if the Iranian government does anything to those protesters, that he's going to come in. He is locked and loaded. Quote, locked and loaded. And I thought the post right above it was about, yeah, let me read it to you real quick. Paul Perez and the Border Patrol have done a fantastic job and so proud that more than half are of Hispanic heritage, which Los Angeles' incompetent mayor, Karen Bass, who hasn't even gotten the permits for people rebuilding their homes after the record setting fire that took place, and the third rate politicians are complaining about. Our enlistment numbers are at records, and we'll keep it that way. There is no group I am more proud of than the Border Patrol and ICE, and nobody understands the border better than our fantastic Hispanic population, which continues to make America great again. But he puts that, like, literally on the heels of this. We're going to come protect, Iranian protesters, but we're hiring all these people to stop American protesters. Like,
Yeah. I, he's such a distraction. I tune him out. I mean, I don't even really listen to him I mean, he's clearly not running things anymore. And I think this is something we need to say more often. It's like he's
there
a
you go.
puppet.
You're right.
He can't get he's not smart enough to have gotten where he is, without corruption, without a lot of wealth, with a whole mechanism. I wrote an article recently about how hopefully he's the last white supremacy president, because it's that mechanism of white supremacy that got him there, that Americans don't want to talk about, but that is the foundational shame of this nation, and it's time for us to address it. I wrote an article, or just a note the other day, about how the reason we don't have universal health care is because of white supremacy. Like, there's just such an
I saw your
ingrained.
post today. I
Yeah.
loved your post today. I saw several that had that sort of vein, and I thought you were dead on.
Yeah, and King Raven, I saw he was on here too, and he's been saying it, and it's just, yeah, we just have to keep forcing people to see that. And this is kind of neat because it ties into what we were saying when the last time we talked. Like, in any dysfunctional family, like, it's usually, if you know the issues of your family, it's like, well, our problem is our dad's an alcoholic and he's a womanizer and he's violent. But it's just sort of like, once it's established in these patriarchal systems, you're just not allowed to say those things. And to survive within that system, you just put all those real problems aside and you ignore them. And then you're like trying to figure out other things, like, well, maybe if I get perfect grades in school, or if I make my bread, and none of these things are going to fix the real problem. And you're not
You'll
looking
never.
at the
It's
real
never good
problem.
enough.
And that's what's happening in the United States with white supremacy. That's that big problem that we just refuse to allow ourselves to just get into it. It's like, let's just actually fix this. And you have those, like, in psychology, we call it an intervention. When you finally say, look, the problem with the family is that you're a drug addict and you got to get your act together. And then they have that collapse. And you said that wonderful thing in the concept, or in the comments the other day, where they feel like you're attacking their ego, and that feels like you're trying to murder their ego. And maybe you could talk more about
It is.
that, because it sounded like that seems really significant to me. And I think on a cultural level, the whole United States is feeling like we're attacking their ego. How do we get over it? How do we get to healing?
Well, it is. I mean, this it's great that you're bringing this up because in this model that I've been working on, I've been trying to develop it forever, and because of all this crap, I finally, like, oh my god, I could see the end. So it's this DCMAL, the acronym. I love it. The DCMAL model, DCMAL. So what it is, it's, and I'm starting to see, you guys. I think that it sincerely is in a good 30% of the population, which is kind of high, but this is how they're doing it. So there's 30% of the population that has a deep need to dominate and control other people. And
Yes,
when to dominate and control others, you have to manipulate them. And so
that's
here's
white supremacy.
my
Yeah,
5 finger model. So they have a need, a deep need to dominate and control others. And the only way you can do that is through manipulation. And there's only two ways to manipulate people. You can aggress or lie to them. And the aggression is like physical, sexual, financial, psychological, judgment.
Yeah.
There's only five of those. There's only five ways to aggress on somebody. So that's it. But if you can really convince these 30%, which I believe this is what Russia did with their psychological warfare, like they totally use a personality disorder model to infiltrate our belief system. And the reality is that um, these people, the only thing that kind of keeps them in check is that they are super obsessed with appearances, right? We see this with Trump. Like the way they appear to others is really important because their egos are involved. Most of the people with cluster B type personality disorders, they're egomaniacs with low self esteem. They're egomaniacs with an inferiority complex. You know, you hear that in the 12 steps all the time. Um, so they're always trying to prove that they're better than somebody else, and they do it by kind of any means necessary. And uh, I don't know, they felt very empowered because of all this like really aggressive speech, and that this appearances has sort of fallen by the wayside. So they've even kind of confederated more than the 30%, which with Trump it was getting into the 40s, right, for a while. His
Yeah.
approval rate was in the 40s for a while.
Eh, The way I look at it is, I mean, the foundational ideology of the United States is white supremacy. Our first dozen presidents, they were all human traffickers because they all had slaves. That's what they
Good
were. So
point.
they were all child rapists. Anybody who is a slave owner, like there's all these lies, this
Ooh,
idea of the benevolent slave owner that doesn't exist. We assume to own another human being is a violation of that person. So they were all child rapists. George Washington was, Thomas Jefferson, every single
yeah,
one of them.
Jefferson.
And these are the people that wrote our founding documents, and it was never, and that's where it all started because there's always a set of rules that's stated in our country and a set of rules that's implied. We the people, we the rich white people is what it means. And when they say conserve, it's about conserving an existing power structure. What you're saying is exactly right. I mean, and it's evolved over time. Like that toxic mind virus of white supremacy has changed. It get worse and worse and worse, and it makes people, like we said, they dehumanize other people. So I always contend all forms of political violence are caused by white supremacy, and this is the reason. Everybody asks, why is it that the United States, even though other countries have guns, we're the only place that has these school shootings? It's because only in the
Right.
United States are people indoctrinated to view human life, as other. Like some people are less than human, so they can kill them. It applies to the toxic rape culture of the United States, all the misogyny.
Yes.
White
Yeah.
supremacy requires the suppression of women. So all of these things are in there. And like you said, like 30% are active, but I would contend we have another 30-50% that are passive. They accept it passively. And I was in this category, as just I grew up in a conservative area, just a white. It's like, okay, I'm 10 years old. I'm learning who I am. I'm confronted with this reality. And standing for the national anthem because the Star Spangled Banner, the third verse of that is racist. I mean, people don't ever talk about the third verse of the Star Spangled Banner, but there's all these dog
It's
whistles
not
by
ringing a
which,
bell.
yeah, nobody knows it. Go look it up. It's about murdering human slaves. And so it shouldn't be. And it was prior to about
Yes.
1917, prior to 1917, it was the Star Spangled Banner wasn't the national anthem. It was when the KKK got involved in Congress that they got it put in there. So whenever these white supremacist groups gain more power, they install more dog whistles to kind of normalize. They make white supremacy part of our natural traditions. And then instead of saying that they're defending white supremacy, they say, hey, this is just our way of life we're defending. These are just our venerated traditions we're defending. So they always avoid the words. And it's really sneaky how they do it. And other nations aren't like this. Anybody who's had the opportunity to live in another country, the second you go to another country which is absent of white supremacy. I lived in Peru for 10 years and the white supremacy wasn't there. And so it was like every time it was like coming up to a top of a set of steps and you like miss a step because you think there's one more step. That's the way I felt constantly. I'm like, what's going on? Because in my mind, what I thought was just human behavior was this psychotic American version of white supremacy that's indoctrinated into us. And so over the next year, what I'm going to be doing is peeling back more of these layers so that we can all purge that mind virus, that white supremacy mind virus from our minds. But that's the inception of the nation, built by all the wealth was stolen labor. All the land was taken through genocide. This country has a lot of things to
Yeah,
apologize for. And
it
when we
does.
say, like the idea of American exceptionalism, they could say the idea of American supremacy. They hide it in simple, it's right out in the open. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. But we really do have to teach our people, and the passive people, the type of person that I was. And again, everybody, I'm not attacking anybody. I talk to Will Fullwood about it all the time. He says, I don't blame people because you're so heavily indoctrinated with it in this country. But it's up to people like me and you and all the people watching to have these conversations and to help people free themselves of this because it hurts us. It hurts everybody.
Well, let's be realistic. I mean, when you're going to confront a situation, like I did, I confronted my family sort of hypocrisy, and you know, goodbye family. My family's gone. But
Yeah.
when you're confronted with stuff, there's fight or flight. But nobody talks about the third one, which is what you just said. You're going to fight or you're going to run, or then there's a paralyzed middle. There is a paralyzed middle of people who don't want to fight and they don't want to flee, so they just kind of stand there like this. I just got out of that. I was telling you that when my kids were born, and I started realizing, oh my God, maybe my kids aren't safe. My kids weren't safe around my family. Is what I started discovering really quickly. It's like I couldn't leave them alone. I mean, a lot of them were breaking the law with my kids, doing dumb
Yeah.
shit, like getting
Well,
stoned and shit, driving them around. I mean, weird things. And I just was like, I didn't want to call anybody out on their bullshit because I needed my family's
yeah.
support.
Yeah.
Um, so,
But not if they're going to get your kids killed. You can't
well,
then.
that's
Yeah.
finally what I had to be like, oh my God. Yeah.
But,
Because I was
but
telling my
again,
therapist everything, and she was like, I'm gonna have to call CPS on you if you leave your kids with them, and you know that they are gonna do something ridiculous. I was like, oh my God, you're gonna call CPS on me? That's how irresponsible I'm being by tolerating their abuse.
yeah. Yeah. No. But, and like you were saying too, everybody's been wondering how can the most loathsome person in the whole world get into office? And it's like part of white supremacy is he's allowed to get away with his crimes. He's not held accountable. The white people are never held accountable. That's part of it. And somebody in the comments too mentioned they're just like, well, it's a colonizer thing. But I think it's really important to know that yeah, it's really important to know that in the United States is unique and we need to address the things uniquely. And it's almost like when you say, well, this is common, this is in a lot of places. We have to address our specific issues. We can't act like, well, this is normal because what is developed in the United States is pretty unique. The This was one of the few nations, one of the last nations to end slavery. I mean, we don't study any of this. And this is all that truth that's buried because they say, well, it makes white people feel uncomfortable. But the horrors of this country, in most other countries, when they ended the various slave trades, all the slaves just died because the life was so bad. The United
Uh,
States was one of the few places that actually had breeder farms where they were raping women and they were forcibly taking their children away and they increased their slave population. The atrocities committed by the United States are right there with the worst in all of history. And we don't learn this by design because we need to have our this delusional belief. And it's the same as if you're in an abusive family, but you say to yourself, "Well, I'm so happy to be in this family because it's the greatest family in the world." When the reality is you're just training yourself not to look at all the horrors that are taking place in
exactly.
that family. And that's what's happened on a countrywide level. So I need everybody just resist that idea to say, like, this is common. People say, like, well, slavery has always been there. That's not, I mean, slavery used to be punishment, but it's only been race based for like the last 400 or 500 years. That's those things have changed and evolved. And we need to do studies because we're so quick to just brush it off. We have to learn about it. It's awful, but we have to learn it.
We do. There are so many studies that need to be done. I mean, psychology is so in its infancy, but let's get to the real heart of this matter. This has happened in the name of Christ. More people have been killed around the world in the name of Christ, I think, than any other religion. And
Yeah,
Christ's
yeah,
word, Christ's only basic word is that we are all the children of God. That means all of us, not just those white people over there, not just those white dudes over there, that we are all a miracle of whatever that force of the universe is that gives life
yes,
to the planet. And we discriminate against animals in plant life. I mean, but the reality is that all life is a miracle. And I mean, I don't know where it came from because it didn't come from Jesus. So it
Yeah.
came from man. It's an effort to manipulate. It's an effort to dominate, control, manipulate. I mean,
Yeah. And it's what's sad about it is that the people whose job it was to defend, the sacred trust of the good things in Christianity. Their job was to defend it. And there was corrupt ones who turned it, who corrupted it and used it, because human beings evolve. And we've seen too, like the Constitution as a founding document, when it was first written, was a very progressive document and it put our ceiling above the ceilings of all other nations. But the Constitution does not contain mechanisms for dealing with the problems that we're dealing with today, right? These things evolve and change over time. But people don't see that, I think it was racism is associating sin with skin color. It was the Pope,
yeah,
the Christian, I think it was Pope Alexander the Sixth, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, he was the one who issued the decree that you could enslave heretics. And
all
then a
right.
couple hundred years later, they had that the slaves started figuring out they could convert to Christianity and get out of slavery. So to protect the church, to protect its profits from the slave trade, had to equate sin with skin color. That's the invention of racism. It's a Christian invention. And then,
Yeah.
after the Civil War, the KKK erupted and then they went away. They combined forces with the Protestants. And they became like the enforcers of the Protestants. So we need more of an effort. And you know what else? All of this is reflected in the big tent, theory of the Democrats. Because they always say, we got to let these people in. And it's like, if you don't have to stay, you have to set some boundaries. You can't let everybody in. You can't bring in people that are violent and racist and cruel because they will contaminate everybody else and push the good people out. And so you've seen that in the Christian religion, where nobody stood up and said, these were the values that this is supposed to be based on. We all need to apply more pressure on our religious leaders right now. They should be a resource. They need to come to us and help overcome this problem, but we can't let them off the hook and say, because they created a massive human rights, a lot of suffering has been done in the name of their institutions, and they have to dismantle that and be forces of good. Everybody has to.
Well, the church is divided, if you ask me, and that's what we were going to talk about tonight was
Yeah.
theocracy. Because Melissa
Yeah.
Corrigan, if you guys didn't see her post today, she had a really amazing post talking about a voting district near her that typically had voted for Kamala, or I can't remember who it was, but had voted for Democrats. I think
Yeah.
360 people voted, and then somebody else, they had zero votes. So they had looked to see if it was voter tampering or some sort of issue. And what she found out was that it was the Jewish Orthodoxy had told their constituents not to vote for this person,
Yeah.
and she went on to this whole like how religious leaders can sometimes affect in such a negative way. And that was the story with a faction of my family. When my natural birth father died, they are Christian nationalists. And, I kept typing her going, I'm going to come to the funeral and I'm going to talk to your pastor. And, I can't believe that he's supporting that you're not inviting us to the funeral. I can't even. And then I thought, no, he's probably the one that told her it was okay. He's
Yeah.
probably the one. And they're getting this from their religious leaders when, yeah, like where the Pope, I love the new Pope. I think that he's really great. But to me, I don't know about anybody else, but the Constitution to me is the golden rule with no religious overtones. It's, you don't, if you're going to hurt me, that's wrong. We got to put a law on that. You can't hurt other people, but other than that, you're free. Go do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anybody else. And I think that's the coolest thing in the world. And it's a
Yeah.
great way for me, like for me, when I was in these abusive relationships, when my therapist threatened to call CPS on me, I was like, okay, wait, if these people are breaking the law, they're abusing me. I mean, that's how tense I was. I mean, sincerely, I literally was making those sort of excuses for my family because I wanted a family, with my kids and
Yeah.
this, like,
No, I know that.
but that wasn't
Everybody
the
does
case.
that. We all do that. And it's always easier to try and like hope for the best and try to do those things. It just doesn't work in some cases. That's the other thing we have to
It
just
doesn't
accept, and we don't
work.
talk about that more. Yeah. And so
You end up
feel good
abusing
about yourself.
yourself. You end up abusing
Yeah.
yourself in those situations.
You know what I find too? At some point, like a part of your like subconscious part of your body, that's what has enough. It's just like, nope. and like there's other parts of you that act so that like something happens so that you have to get out of there. There's other things in control of us more than just our conscious thoughts. But based on what you were saying, we were just watching a dystopian movie, where the characters are in this horrible reality they're being lied to, and they slowly have to awaken up. And it occurs to me, all these films like 1984 and Animal Farm and We and all these different types of things where you watch the characters emerge from this dystopian reality where everything is just lies and they have to find their way out. And the reason we have that kind of literature is because that's our real life. Our real life is like that. Everything we've been told about the United States, how great this place is, how it's the land of prosperity and freedom and justice, that's all lies. None of that is true. And, it's like you think about things like, oh, well, we can be proud. We've been great inventors. We got to the moon. The rocket scientist that took us to the moon was a Nazi scientist that they brought over with Operation Paperclip. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
one thing after another. And once we start unpacking all these stories and see what the reality is, but
Oh,
also they want to
Edison.
beat us down. Well, they want to beat us down so that we feel we can never attain this ideal. So then we accept that we have to work hard all our lives. We never get ahead. Only a few rich people are allowed to enjoy any benefits. This whole hierarchy of oppression that we have to deal with, people are awakening to it now. A year ago, I would say stuff and I would lose followers. And only now is the time where I can speak openly about these things, where people are like, you know what? Because everybody knows no matter how hard you
Because
work, you're
now
never going to
you
get
can
ahead
see it.
now. Yeah, it's becoming obvious. So we really just have to keep pushing that. And religion, unfortunately, I mean, that theoretical idea of the benevolent dictator. Okay, it doesn't exist. And it's like
No.
religion is built on a model that you accept a dictator because God is a dictator. It's fascism. Christianity is fascism. It's just that God's not supposed to actually be here. And it's what the reason we get
I don't
fascism.
agree.
Well, the model is, it could be used good, but what happens is you see these awful people who see it and say, I'm going to be that God figure on earth. And that's how you get fascism, right? So, so like, I'm the unquestionable leader.
Um,
But go on. I'll
oh
but
no, sorry. I was like, where is Ginger? I haven't seen Ginger in a while either. Maybe he took a break for Christmas. But you were talking about like that earlier. And I was like thinking Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison's a great example. Like, but he stole other people's ideas. He was
yeah,
just kind of
Tesla.
a tyrant.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's the problem. I mean, yeah, if you look at a beautiful thing, like these ideas, like as you were saying before, the ideas in Christianity are beautiful. Being humble, applying to yourself to a good cause, all those great things. But it's vulnerable because you train people to be obedient. You train them that obedience is the ultimate ideal. And then when a human being establishes themselves, they do that lie. That's when it changes from, religion to fascism, is when they take advantage of all that conditioning and they abuse it. And that's what the issue is today in our society and so much of our problems.
yeah. I mean, totally. And again, it's utilizing those lies and then threatening aggression or locking you up or some sort of
Yeah,
punitive damage if you don't believe these lies. I mean, there is no
Napoleon.
benevolent dictator. Yeah, I mean that's ridiculous. That's calling a benevolent abuser. I mean, there's it's what? No, it's
Yeah.
hypocrisy. I mean, it's a dichotomy. No, it doesn't exist.
Yep. And there's something wrong with you if you see it as abuse. And then that gets to the America love it or leave it kind of arguments where we're never allowed to even point out any of the things that aren't working. We always have to act like we should just be grateful to be here, that we should never even ask to have our worker protections or health care or any of these things. We've all been conditioned to believe all that. And it's not easy to awaken from this. And then, especially when everything. And that's the other thing. It's like
Exactly,
white
Courtney.
supremacy is so prevalent. It's like, how can it be hidden and also be a part of absolutely everything we do? But again, it's that model of your father's abusive or whatever, or your husband or whoever's abusive in your life or your partner. And you just train yourself not to see it because you're trying to make things work and you're trying to give them the opportunity to change on their own. And it's just at some point you just have to, awaken. And that's woke. That's the word woke. That's why people have been saying it. It's like, wake the hell up, see what's going on.
Well, it's like I was telling you guys in the Rachel Kushner, Jared Kushner's grandmother, her oral history about the Holocaust. It took me aback that she just kept talking about that they would see these atrocities over and over, and then she just would continually have this hope that those Nazis were going to do something like that again, and they were doing them over and over. But their hope, or this, and I just realized what that is. We just keep making excuses for abuse for some reason because
Yeah,
we want to believe that people made a mistake and that they're going to change. But that's usually not behavior. Like I said, this is a pattern in people's
yes,
lives, and it's a belief system. And like I said,
yes.
when you have a need to dominate other people, it usually stems because you've either been abused or you get anxiety
Mhm.
if you're not in control of your situation. And so that's when it becomes compulsive and impulsive behavior. And then that's when you start getting abused, because these people then will start lying to you, and then you're not dealing in any sort of reality, so you're not making good decisions. Or they're physically hurting you financially or fucking with your mind, all
Yeah.
these things that people do to gain power over each other.
Yeah, and I mean, it's grooming, it's the indoctrination, and all those things, like, just the way kids get punished, and, that's why I was quick to leave church because 'cause I'm a curious person, and I would ask questions. It's like, "Well, this doesn't make," and instead of being rewarded, you're attacked. Exactly, you're bullied, you're humiliated in front of the room, and then I get to the point where I could pretty much verbally humiliate anybody back. I could be pretty quick-witted. It's like, "Well, what about this then?" What it's like, so that, the authority figures don't like it when they're laughed at. And then what you were saying, the need to dominate, because and it's I think that's what's also being exposed, because the people in charge of our country are both the cruelest and they're the most inept. They're the weakest, they're the ones that have absolutely no abilities of their own. And it's just sort of
That's a
it's
narcissist.
yeah, and it's but then
They've
it's
never really accomplished much. They talk this big game, but then when you look at what they've actually done, they've never really accomplished very much, or they failed
yep.
at a lot of things.
Yes,
George
and they
Bush,
wanna put their name
George
they
W.
wanna write their name on other people's achievements and take everybody else's achievements for their own, because 'cause they're incapable, and is there a better example of that than the doofus in the White House right now? He stamps his name on everything. He's never built anything in his life, and it's just sorta like, yeah, at some point, and so but what we have to do, though, is look away from him, and yeah, and we have to look at that whole mechanism of things, like the legal system that allowed him to be there, the perversions of religion that have become so prevalent in the United States that make people think a guy like that is acceptable, that make us look away, like the false patriotism that makes us unwilling to offer constructive criticisms for our country. And it's all the different gatekeeper systems that we have that prevent qualified people from getting positions of power and only allow these cruel people, that have demonstrated the cruelty of white supremacy to rise. And it's just yeah, I mean, everybody in America, if you get a chance, just get the hell out of America for 6 months if you can, and just get anywhere where you can see a world where white supremacy doesn't dominate. No.
Traveling changed my life. I also, my first like live-in boyfriend was African American, so I learned in the 80s. So I learned a lot about my family then. Like they had always told me that they weren't racist or whatever, but then I realized that they didn't even know any African American
Yeah.
people. They didn't even know black people. They were more racist about Latinos, which a lot of people in Texas are. A lot of white people are pretty racist towards Latinos here. So
Uh,
hey, but I wanted to talk to you really quick before I forget, because I keep forgetting what I was going to say. Now that we're talking about these people that need to dominate and control, we need to talk about the people in our own section of the woods, the Democrats who participated in some of this downfall. What do
yeah,
you think?
yeah. Well, absolutely, and that's what I was getting to where particularly among the rich. I mean, we're overrepresented. Every position of power in the United States, the vast majority of it is occupied by these rich white men. And just by virtue of them being rich white men, they're basically have been indoctrinated with the belief system of white supremacy. And so in their minds, they're not aware of what they're maintaining. They're not making that conscious decision. But white supremacy works on that subconscious layer because they attack you and indoctrinate you when you're young, and everybody just thinks, we're just inclined to say this is just human nature, or they'll say profit justifies everything. If it's profitable, it's okay. So there's just all these different mechanisms in our heads that we are unaware that they contribute to the larger mechanism of white supremacy that exists. So there's all these passive people, and they would be offended if you say what you just did is an act of white supremacy. they would be offended by that. Well, you're calling me that, because they haven't made a conscious decision to do that. But that's the underlying issue, is that people do it without even thinking about it in this country. People act that way, and it's something I had to learn. Because when I was in my 20s, I'm like, why am I pushing people away? And you have to go through the layers of your thoughts, and it's like, why do I think this? Where did this thought come from? Purge that thought. And now I'm able to, treat people with kindness and care about their emotions, and forge strong friendships and relationships that weren't possible until I removed that stuff that had been downloaded into my brain against my will.
There's a strength that comes to your life when you are honest about everything that you do, and that you start, and when you're honest about everything that you do, especially with yourself, then you really start developing empathy for other people, because you see that we're all feel the same things, we're all struggling the same way. But to me, I have to say this just because I talk about my own life a lot. You guys not because I'm like talking about myself. I talk about my life because it's kind of my own experience that I that I know about. My dad was born in 34, and he was in the army and really wanted to serve in the military, which he did. He served in the army, but he wanted to go to war. But the reality is that this is the most spoiled generation, that generation, the baby boomer generation, or that around the baby boomer generation. It's the most spoiled generation on the planet of in the history of the earth, because of the spoils of World War II. The reality was, if you were educated and you were a white male after World War II, you were hired. I mean, we had all this money. There was all this
Yeah.
innovation. All this stuff came in. These people could get houses. They got
Yeah.
jobs. My dad became a CEO of multiple companies, and he was just an average student at A&M. Um, but I think that it was sort of an unspoken thing, just the way the society was set up after that time. And I think this is what Trump is in love with in his mind, that all the opportunities that came to the white people. It didn't come to women. Women didn't have credit cards. My mother wasn't able to
Yep.
have her own bank
Yep.
account until 1974.
Yep.
Either
Yep.
your dad or your husband took care of you. You weren't a single woman living in the world like we are today. It wasn't like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's an inherent sort of racism that was involved there. And even though we got to the political correctness where we wouldn't discuss racism, there's still this belief that, oh, we would have that sort of money and success if it wasn't for all these immigrants here. And that's not the case at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that scapegoat. And I think it's important to mention too, the GI Bill was so important, but they didn't give it to black people who had served. They weren't able to collect those benefits. And that's another thing that's just hidden from history, when people are like, well, they didn't have the same opportunity. They served bravely in World War II and they didn't get the GI benefits. It's complete bullshit. Yeah, but just layer after layer of erasing all these lies that we've been told. Another issue I think kind of comes into things. I've been there's that lead poisoning issue where they had leaded gasoline, which didn't go away until when was it? About the 80s. So they've got a whole generation of people that were, subjected to lead poisoning, and that's kind of
Wait, where
unfortunate. Have
was
you ever heard of
this?
this? What's that?
No, where was this?
Well, they used to put lead in gas, and so when
Oh yeah.
it made people crazy. And once they took the lead out of the gas, violent crimes went down. So it was literally brain damage for a whole generation. And that, it went on for decades. They were using leaded gas for decades. So, I
Uh,
mean, I wonder how much,
yeah,
I
the
mean, we're kind of
50s
emerging from
chemical
that.
experiments done on us. I mean, literally the 50s and all that, the 40s, 50s, all the development of chemical everything. And
Well, that's because
yeah,
all the Nazi scientists they brought back after Project Paperclip, after World War II,
yeah.
they brought all the Nazi scientists over, and then they started experimenting with like lysergic acid, diethylamide on soldiers and things like that. So, but I think too, like just lead-based paint.
Biological warfare. There was a lot of
Well,
biological warfare stuff too. All those sheep that died, like in out in the desert, they were dropping all sorts of stuff out in the desert. People in New Mexico. I don't think you guys have seen a picture of those beautiful women in a
oh,
in
yeah,
a
with
little
the
stream with an atomic bomb behind them. All those women died. All of them were dead by the age of 30. I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
Then there's what is it, the radium girls, where they used to paint they used to paint glow in the dark radium on watches, and then they would lick the brush and put it. So
Oh,
they all like got cancer and lost their. lost their jaws and died. So, I mean,
Like Marie Curie. Oh,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, there is an argument to be made that, like, over the last yeah, well, I mean, there was a good 40, 50 years where we entered like the technological age and we were able to make all these chemicals and we weren't able to use them responsibly. And so we're trying to emerge. Like we were all, our brains are actually toxic, like that whole generation was subjected to breathing lead in the air all the time. It made them violent, and maybe that made everybody kind of reinforce being the existing white supremacist ideology that was there, and just that combined with that hubris. Hubris is the word for the United States, where we just don't
that is the
recognize
word.
our mistakes. We don't have accountability, and it's so heartbreaking because it gets to that point where people will vote against universal health care just because they're clinging on to this promise that'll never be delivered, where they're thinking, they're not even aware they're thinking thoughts about their own superiority. They don't have a realistic model of how a healthy relationship could be. And so they're just kind of walking in the footsteps of the people that came before and who were also miserable. And it's at the point now where finally people are like, enough is enough. And it's like we can have good things. But it is heartbreaking how we can't break through to our family. I was thinking of telling people, I'm going to write an article just saying, look, if you can't get along with your family, but if they're really repentant, tell them to subscribe to my newsletter and read it for a year. They can read and then you can talk to them about my newsletter. So I can be the one who explains to them all the things so you can be separated from it. Because people are going to be coming to you with their hat in their hand, not all the way because they have so much pride. But even MAGA's waking up to the fact that they've been lied to. So we do need to come a model to reclaim the ones that are honest, but it shouldn't have to be everybody else doing the heavy lifting because it's hard. It's too painful.
Are Maggie coming around? I'm not seeing it where I
Some
am.
of them
So.
are. There's always a few fringe ones that are, and we got to capture the ones that are serious, but we also can't hand them the world. Just because Marjorie Taylor Greene said a few bad words about the president doesn't mean we should nominate her for the Democratic ticket. It's like, okay, well, you can have an opportunity. It's like because she's been an awful person. She's done a lot of really awful things. She's chasing around David Hogg, after that poor guy he was in the mass shooting and she was telling him he's a faker. She's awful.
He
But
was
if she is
18. He
willing,
was a child. I mean,
yeah.
and she's like yelling at him on the street. I mean, yeah,
But
terrible.
I will give her opportunity to redeem herself. That's what she gets. She shouldn't be able to enrich herself. She shouldn't be able to go around do all the talk shows and get $10,000 every time she speaks and become rich because she's already used her office in Congress to enrich herself because they can do insider trading. And that's the thing that irritates me too, because people like Nancy Pelosi also do it. Like almost everybody except for AOC uses their knowledge to make themselves rich. And if we have Democrats doing it, they're just as corrupt as the Republicans. I mean, corruption is corruption. Just because our guys only steal
Shoot.
200 million and they steal 2 trillion, we're still corrupt. And that has to be fixed.
Yeah, the Democrats, what I like to call the corporate gems, but they're not corporate. They're beyond corporate. They've been accepting money from Russia now for years. And I think
Yeah.
this is a large reason why they didn't say anything. Chuck Schumer, a huge one.
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi's another. There's several that are complicit. They didn't want Mondami. They literally
Yep.
made a campaign against Bernie and
Yeah.
Mondami. So
Yeah.
they're not
Well,
looking out for our party or the party. It's not even my party. Sorry, I don't subscribe to anybody anymore. I just want to vote for the good
yeah.
person. I'm done with the
Yeah.
parties.
Well, no, and that's really interesting too. And I find a lot of it because I'll write an article and you'll instantly get attacked if you offer any criticism about what the Democrats are doing. They're not winning though. I mean, Democrats aren't winning. So they should be expecting some criticisms. And for them to turn around and get mad at somebody like me, I'll get flooded by comment. I said, maybe you should have done this. It's like maybe if you promise universal health care, you'll start getting I wrote an article the other day. It's like, how about a 100% tax cut on income tax under $100,000 because that would cover 80% of the population. It's like if you're offering a tax cut to 80% of the population, that'd be kind of strong platform. And they've all got Ivy League degrees, and there's reasons they're not making promises that would actually get them elected. And there's reasons that they're not challenging these elections that are clearly been tampered with. The 2024
Yeah,
election, they had bomb
clearly.
threats. Yeah, the bomb threats were called in. That's tampering with the election. That's a complete justification to do some hand recounts. They don't even put aside money for hand recounts. I mean, that's insane. And you need to
Well,
catch.
nobody talks about what happened in Texas. I mean, Greg Abbott changed a bunch of laws. Like he changed the driver's license to where it has a barcode on the back, and he said that if you don't show up with the driver's license with that barcode, you can't vote. I don't know if that was carried out or not, but I think it kept a lot of people at home thinking that they were going to be hassled at the polls, and if they were already sort of in that paralyzed middle anyway, if there's any sort of outside pressure, they were just like, throw their hands up. I'm not going to go vote this time, and I'll just let everybody else figure it out. I think that is a huge reason why a lot of people didn't vote.
Well, and then there's things like in Florida where they were prior to the election, they were sending out all these threats about people voting illegally, and they were really making a suggestion they were just going to be arresting black people at the polling places, and they do arrest black people when they go in to cast their votes. They will discredit votes if there's a mark on it. They'll say you have to come back in for voter curing. I interviewed Greg Palast not too long ago, and so just all these tactics of voter suppression that are active. And he was saying, he's like, well, don't even worry about, like these ideas like, using Starlink satellites to change the votes. He's like, don't even worry about that. Think about all these other things that are really easy to verify. And then the Democrats have the nerve to come and yell at us like, well, if you don't vote for us, you get them. Well, we're trying to vote for them, and then they run candidates that are so centrist that when we get them elected, then they do things like they vote against, the Democratic idea. If Manchin had voted for the Build Back Better bill, it's like that got gutted, and that never gets
Oh
talked about
yeah,
either. Build Back Better got gutted because we had Manchin and what was her name, Sinema in there. They refused
Sinema,
to
Kristen
pass that.
Sinema, Sinema, is that right? Kristen Sinema.
Fiction cinema, something like that. But it's like that's never even part of the dialogue then. And they instantly pivot to, well, the US population isn't ready for a woman. It's like that's not an acceptable thing for you to say. You got to make them ready. You got to make them ready then. We can't just accept that we're racist. We have to make the country not racist. That's our objective, and they just are passive. They don't do it.
I just
Look at
think it's
that.
ridiculous. I mean, again, listening to this thing of Malcolm Nance and democracy, yeah, the whole thing with Hillary. I mean, it was so intentional to just drag her through the mud. But hey, I wanted to bring up the story because way back a minute ago when we were talking about some other stuff, it reminded me that there was a story this week that we all should know about. Um, in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands American Cemetery in Margraten, honoring Black World War II soldiers. They were quietly removed, sparking outrage from Dutch officials and U.S. Congress members. Apparently, something that Trump did asked for these people to remove uh, the the memorial that was to these soldiers, that African American soldiers that lost their lives in World War II.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
because
just
it's related
constant.
to DEI. That was the excuse that DEI
Yeah.
is ridiculous.
And it's so important now. And I keep telling people, it's like I'm old enough now. It's like when you're 10 or 20 or whatever, you're just accepting the reality. You think this is the way the world's always been. Now I've seen enough decades where I know things have changed and things have been different. And talking to people like you and Bob Dana and people have seen other things and they know things can be different. And we just have to speak. That's so important. And we got a lot of wonderful people here listening to us. Please
We
speak. I mean, the
do,
second you're
yeah.
feeling frustrated and it's like and it's getting over those things because if you're in an abusive relationship and they try to gaslight you, the way you remember things isn't the way it happened. That's what the country is doing to us. And you have to preserve those truths. We have to preserve the truth. And it requires all the voices speaking out. And the United States is too big. There's too many people here. There's too many brave people that are going to speak out, that are going to push back, that are going to refuse to let the truth be erased because that's what these white supremacy groups always try to do. They erase anything. And it comes back down to that's why all their relationships fail because they are incompetent people. They're going to have a humiliation in front of their families at some point. And their families always see their failure. And, it's like you're not ever going to be happy unless you push aside that white supremacy narcissistic model where you think you're the unquestionable God figure, that perversion of Christianity, because you're going to do something that proves it's not. And your family's going to see that. And then you're going to resent the family for bearing witness to your failure. That's why we have people like Goebbels who shot his whole family, killed them all, you know? And that's
Oh,
how
he
white
did. I
supremacy
didn't
is.
know that.
Oh, yeah. Rather than
Oh,
have him be
at
taken,
the end.
his kids,
Yeah,
I can't remember if he poisoned them or shot them, but they were all dead. They found them all lined up. And that's what's going to happen if you
I
don't.
didn't know
And
that.
that's why I tell people eliminating white supremacy is a white person problem because it's toxic, you know? It's hurting your relationships, especially for white men. It's speaking specifically to white men who really are the ones who bear this burden and need to fix themselves because American white men are toxic. And you gotta, and it's like, and I don't even need to sit here and say not all, because it's in everybody. It's even now I'm purging these things from me that make me not an effective father and not an effective friend because and it's indoctrinated against your will. It's put in you against your will. So in that way, it's like, please just believe it's there. Don't be like, oh, you're attacking me because I'm not attacking you. I'm attacking something that was put into your mind against your will. And the more white men who understand this and join this fight and realize we can be better spouses and fathers and citizens of this nation, then we'll be on the road to prosperity. And until we do, it's just going to be miserable for the people we love.
That's why I love you and Nick so much because when y'all come on, you're just such a positive, like, show. That's what y'all are manly men to me because that's another
Thank
thing. I mean, it is completely psychotic to think that you're coming from a position of power by never admitting you have
you.
faults or that you make mistakes. My dad has never ever said he's
Yeah.
done anything wrong. That's
Yep.
ridiculous. Of course you make mistakes.
It's dangerous because, yeah, and when a person like that shows his ass and does something stupid, he hates his own family then. That's what
Then
happens.
it gets pushed on you. It's your fault that I did this. And that's the
Yep.
classic abuser. You made me hit you. You made me treat you like this. You
Yeah.
acted crazy. So I've done this horrible thing to you. Yeah. I mean, whatever. I mean,
And that
that's the classic
self-loathing.
abusive stance.
Oh, and it really, I mean, it's really fun because your psychology background is really helpful. Sometimes you're adding little phrases that kind of reframe it and like just putting it in history. And then, yeah, but everybody knows because it's the same model. Whether you're talking about abusive relationships or abusive nation, it's always the same model. And we know
It's
how
the
to
same
handle that.
behavior. We're not that complex. We like to think we are. I mean, like I said, when I narrowed it down, I'm like, you really can only manipulate people two ways by lying or aggressing. That's it. It seems so much more complex than that. It's not. We're not that complex. It's not that rocket sciencey.
Yeah, and just that false idea that we have to pacify them because they're wrong. We have to stand up and stop it. I mean, we have to have that intervention, and just it's just so many things because that basic assumption. Well, we have to reach out to them. It's like, no, first you have to establish your own safety. And they pervert, all these things that sound like good concepts. It's stunning. Once you actually start going through all your thoughts and all the things you assume, you realize how just about every good concept that you've ever heard while growing up as a citizen in this nation has been somehow perverted to support a mechanism of white supremacy. It's literally everywhere, and then we're not allowed to talk about it at all, as that's part of it too. So, yeah, people are starting to figure it out, but he's the white supremacy president. I mean, when people say, "Well, imagine if Obama had done this," they're admitting it. They know because if he'd have done these things, he'd have been in jail because he's not a white supremacy president. But the white supremacy, they just gave out billions of dollars to farmers, right? Farmers are the ones who are like, no socialism, and then, oh, we're in trouble. Give us billions of dollars from the government. It's like it's socialism. But because
Oh,
they're
don't
white,
even.
predominantly white, they're receiving the money and it's all good for them. So I don't see it as socialism then.
Well, and my favorite is, I know so many people who are against socialism, but the second that their Medicare comes through Medicaid or, they get old enough
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, this is socialism, blah, blah, blah. And then the second they get it, not one of them returns it.
Yep.
Rich people, I know some of the richest people.
Yep.
Well, I'm friends with some very rich people. Anyway, none of them have turned down their socialist medicine. And when they get it, they always talk about how great it is and how, wow, I didn't know it could be this great and blah blah blah. And I'm like, we're one of the
Yeah.
only countries in the world. We're the richest country in the world, and countries that make less money than us have universal health care for all their people. And we're like, wait until we're 65.
Yeah.
And they want it to go up. Most of the people I know wanted to go to 80 or whatever. I'm like,
Yeah. It's so but I mean, that's that duality because
I
everything has
guess.
two meanings in the United States. And when they say socialism, what they really mean is they only want government benefits for white people. It's white supremacy. That the people that say they're anti-socialism are expressing the dogma of white supremacy again. It's always ties to that. And
Oh, you're right, and they have this belief or this idea, I think, that that you don't have money or you're in a bad position because you're lazy. That's
yeah,
what I hear a lot from the rich people. But the reality is, like most of the rich people I know have gotten rich because of nepotism. You know, they go to
yeah,
college, they do fairly poorly. That Rick Perry barely made a 1.76, which is a 1/10 degree above failing. And then that was expunged from his record. Mike Johnson, same thing. He got his GPA expunged because they all like did terrible in school.
yeah.
But they end up having all this money and because they've got rich friends and rich family members, and they bring each other onto companies and then they all work together. I mean, yeah.
Yep. And it's the prosperity gospel part of that, where it's like that's a religion has been perverted again, where they preach that like wealth is a reward for people who've worked hard and all. It's complete nonsense, but that's
Yeah.
been developed over the last couple hundred years in the United States, and it's taken as truth now. So all good ideas get corrupted, but that's why we have to have other good people to push back against them and to restore the decent part of it, because it would be nice to retain the nice parts of Christianity and say this is what is meant. Quit perverting it into this evil thing, and just all the different ideas that people push back against, they can be fixed. We just need some educated people in our government for a change.
Yeah, and people who actually have faith. I mean, I don't know. I have moved beyond Christianity, but I was raised as a Christian. Now I kind of look more at the universal things that we share that are positive, and I do believe there's a force in the universe that's greater than us.
Well, yeah,
And and
definitely.
I have a weird relationship with whatever that is on the other side, and I always laugh because anyway, yeah, I mean, animals and plants, plants especially, we are so disrespectful to trees. And without trees, I mean, trees are like the most amazing thing ever. They tell us when the weather's changing. I mean, you can watch to see what they're doing and kind of be, oh my God, a cold front's going to come in about 3 weeks, or they start preparing. And I think they communicate. There's lots of studies that show that they communicate through their root systems. So I mean, and we just
Yeah,
cut them down and don't care. You don't have to cut a tree down to get half of its stuff from it. You could just trim it and use its lumber and let it keep growing. And I don't know.
yeah.
Now
Well,
I'm
being
going off
humble.
into crazyville, but
Oh, no, no, I thought that was great, and I mean, just being humble, and what I learned because in college, my major was English, and then I got a minor in physics, and it's just like, once you start exploring the realities of the universe, like, it's like, I couldn't have made any of this up. This is so bizarre. So it's like deferring to and just acknowledging, "Yeah, I don't know." That's the thing, and that's the other thing you get from these authoritarian figures who can never be wrong. They'll never admit they don't know something. Then they'll make an open mistake where everybody can see, and then it becomes the whole nation's responsibility to just turn our heads away like, "Oh, we didn't see that either," because we have to preserve their ego. Their ego is somehow is more important than our lives and our ability to live. That's just nonsense. So, yeah,
exactly.
just vote out. Mainly, it's just vote out the rich white people. That's the easiest thing. The
Oh,
rich
but
white men.
you just said, and this is kind of full circle because that's what you kind of opened with about, because when narcissists, when they are confronted with the truth and they have to admit that they failed, they typically
Right.
respond in a really dramatic fashion. Like I always laughed in I would just said it, the Dragons show on HBO,
Game of
where
Thrones.
they Game of
Yeah.
Thrones, where they had the rats in the bucket, and they light the fire at the end of the bucket. The rat literally go eat through the person. I mean, that's what they're like. Like they just would do not want to take any sort of accountability at
Yeah.
all because
Yeah.
it's like an ego death. They
Yeah.
feel like you're coming for who they are because their whole view is that they're better than. They have to prove
Yeah.
they're better than, and they're always manipulating to appear better than and to feel better than. You know,
Can you talk
it's
more
on.
about ego death? I'm just curious about that because how does that just that structure of that? Because that's what we have to provoke. We have to get them through that. We have to kill that evil ego and then reinstall something decent, I guess. But what does the ego death mean? That's interesting.
I mean, like I said, I think it's admitting that you are not perfect. I don't know what the rocket science is about it, but I mean, I know that, like with my family, because both my parents have personality disorder. Um, oh my God. I mean, they would want you dead. I mean, like their child, like rip the teeth and like do horrible things and then go and sabotage stuff. I mean, anything to prove that you're less than and that they don't do
Yeah.
anything wrong. I mean, it's their whole day, the appearances. Like I said, keeping up the appearances is a need to be better than everybody else, or at least as good, and then kind of constantly belittling other people all day long. So demeaning people all the time. I mean, it's
Yeah.
constant. It's so ingrained in the psyche. So it is an ego death. You have to be humble and let it go. And I don't know. I did it through therapy
Yeah.
because
Well, that's
I just couldn't live
fascinating.
like that.
And it's just that's your identity, I guess. I guess it'd be, and this is
Yeah.
we're getting close to our time, but I like thinking more about that. It's like, what is that process? It's like, what even is the ego? How do you reach the ego? How do you get people to recognize they're doing things wrong like that? Where you're recognizing a truth or they have to pervert reality to serve this sense of their own identity. Is that a fair way of saying it? I mean, because then they can't recognize a mistake, so then they can never grow as people. They can't ever admit that they caused somebody pain, so they can't acknowledge that other people even feel pain. It's just all this strange way. I guess I'm just at what part of the conscious mind is that where do and it's something that's ingrained in them? Is that something, I mean, in the United
I
States,
think
yeah,
it's
we kind of
learned.
push it in a lot of ways. Yeah,
I
okay,
think
it's
it's learned
learned.
behavior. I think it's totally learned, and especially if you grow up around it, it's propped up by the people around you. But I think that this opportunity right now, that's what's happening. You were saying, I mean,
Yeah,
as people are going to start waking up and realize that they contributed to the destruction of our own nation, I think that
yeah,
this will be a great opportunity for people to be able to start learning how to be a little more humble. And I did a lot of work with writing and talking about my own feelings. And like I said, being honest with myself is a really big
yeah,
part of it. And finding somebody that you could be honest with, like a therapist or a group that's trying to do it. I always talk about the 12 steps. That everybody in the 12 steps is there. We admitted they're all there to try to learn how to be honest. Like that's the point, so you could take accountability for your addiction or your addictive behavior. The numbers of personality disorder and addiction populations are really large. 33 to 70%, something like that. So at least a third of the people in there. Like I said, it's always a third. Um, Autoimmune disorders, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, the numbers of personality disorder are extraordinarily high in those disorders. And I think it's because there's a lot of trauma, and sometimes if you're not addressing yourself in a fully honest way, it starts psychosomatic,
yeah,
expressing itself in an illness. So there, a lot of those patients, I think, need a lot of extra help with therapy. And, I don't know.
yeah,
We all need therapy. We all need therapy sometime in our life. And it's not going to, well, it could hurt you if you get the wrong therapist. But I mean, if you get a good therapist that's helping you to learn about yourself, I think
yes.
there's nothing good can come out of it.
Yeah, and that's a burden again in the United States they put on women because there's this assumption that the woman will just fix the man, like all these men stomping around with that's fundamental and it's like it's completely flawed. But that's another thing that people absorb and think is true, like, oh, I'm gonna get married and then my wife will handle this emotional side of me so I don't have to do it, which is nonsense. A model I like to use for MAGA is like Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver. Do you remember
Oh,
the
yeah.
Robert and there's a scene in there I think is kinda heartbreaking because he just doesn't know. He's got a dim awareness of what a relationship is like, and he's like, "Well, people take girls to the movies." So then he takes Sybil Shepherd to this pornographic movie. She's like, What the hell is
She's like,
this?"
what
And
the
she loses.
hell? Yeah.
And then he's like confused and hurt by this, but he honestly doesn't know. And so that's really kind of the heartbreaking thing about the mega movement because they deep down they want to make that connection, but then they're totally inept and not capable of doing it. And when they try, they fail and they do something awful and offensive. And when somebody says, "Hey, that was awful and offensive," then they become angry, and so they don't ever learn. And so and like the whole Travis Bickle personality arc where he goes from being like just frustrated, unable to make a relationship to like deciding to go shoot a bunch of people. That's That's the white supremacy mind virus at work. That's how it decays your psychology. And you watch people, you can get away with it. I mean, these men who have like this just perverse sense of what a relationship should be like.
Right.
Yeah, they have a perverse sense of what a relationship should be like. It might last for 6 years, and then people are like, "I can't live like this anymore." And so they get that kind of false response like, "Oh, I just need to, find somebody younger or find somebody else who find," and then they get married and it's like another 6 years. You can't have that enduring, 50-year marriage if you've got all these screwed up toxic masculinity ideas floating through your head. And that's just
I
unfortunately what America programs into its young men.
I was going to say too, personality disorder. They tend to have a lot of fantasies. They really they don't deal in a lot of just flat reality. It's a lot of made up stuff and a lot of yeah, a lot of fantasy. And they might not admit it, but Trump's world is it's just a lot of fantasy, a lot of Hitler fantasy, a lot of power fantasy. It's bizarre some of his stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
Kushner, I think too. Kushner, he's not really dealing with the full deck over there. And my next thing about Kushner is going to be about his relationship with Ivanka, because apparently she wears the pants in that relationship, and I believe that.
But I see as a big solution though, because and what I'm seeing is that the white supremacy model targets kids because they use authority, they use the perverse version of authority, where if it's if you're worshiping honestly a religion, it's something healthy. If you're worshiping a human, then it's fascism. That's that. And young people, they want to earn trust. It's just a natural part of being a kid. You don't know anything, you just love the authority figures in your life. You want to please them, and that's the point where you're vulnerable to these lies. Because if you try to teach a person white supremacy when they're 30 or whatever, they're just gonna be like, "That's nonsense." So they target kids, and so our first thing is here is to just protect the kids. And you see how they target kids with this Epstein bullshit. They're just
Well,
first people.
you brought it up the last time, and yeah, it does start in school. This whole like, your
Yeah.
teacher's the authority, and you, as little kids, better do what I say, and they want you to like color in the lines and do what I do, and if you're not, you're a bad kid. And I remember my kid was in second grade, and the teacher, there were only 8 kids in the class, and 4 of them were male, and she diagnosed all 4 of the males with ADD, all 4 of them in a class of 8. And I'm like, well, what do you, I mean, yeah, my son is sort of has some of that stuff, but she brings me in, and she shows all the coloring pictures. And my kid and another kid had gotten pencils and made these amazing storyboards with this super cool stick figures and bombs and all this stuff. And she was horrified because they did bombs. And I'm like, and then she showed me these other the little girls that colored perfectly in the lines and all these colors with crayons and everything. And I was like, but this looks like a damn movie storyboard. This is amazing. How are you not seeing like how cool this is? Because it wasn't what she wanted. So they were automatically being pegged as like not being good and being bad kids, and they need to do this and they need to do that and they need to do this. What I want, what I say, and it's like, I don't know. I also think sometimes our school system,
Yeah,
uh,
there's some, but I mean, it's like the farmer mentality too, where it's like no matter how good you do a job, it's never good enough, and that just
yeah.
establishes that. And you just gotta break people down so they don't feel they're ever deserving of a reward. You hand them a possible task
Oh,
after impossible task, then they're all broken down. So then they get that self-loathing, and rather than direct it at the unfair system, they find a scapegoat, and they go after, immigrants, or they go after the black community, the LGBTQ plus. And our way we handle sexuality is really unfortunate. And that helps, where they because the town where I grew up was extremely homophobic to the point where you couldn't even express your affection to your male friends, had nothing to do with any form of sexuality or whatever. And they'd start attacking you like the whole structure would, as if to like, because they know like a strong relationship, strong bonds, being able to forge those strong bonds, that disrupts, the whole white supremacy mindset, the mechanism that's put in place that allows evil people to just avoid accountability for all their crimes and get swept all up like a tide all the way to the White House so that they can spend the rest of their lives just hurting us. We got to change that. Why is this hard? I mean, it's that whole system. That's got to be
it's a
fixed. And it'll be
culture.
fixed.
It,
Yeah,
in America, for sure, it's a culture of narcissism. If you ask me, if
absolutely.
you're succeeding, if you're telling people that they're dumber than you, and if you're like you're perceived as like somebody in charge if you're like, telling everybody
Yeah,
how they're doing everything wrong. But and it's ridiculous because that person actually really isn't bringing the best out of everybody or making things work in
yeah,
a good management way.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the thing to me. It's like we need to learn how to manage ourselves and manage each other, like to get the best out of ourselves in our environment instead of always trying to dominate over it. I mean, even we
yeah,
dominate over environment with
yeah,
fences and the way we farm and the way we cut things down. I mean, we're always trying to control it all. Why don't we work with it and manage things? And that's considered weak. And to me, that's smart,
yeah.
and it works.
And that's how the States acts on a world scale. It's got to be the biggest country. It's got to be the country that dominates all other countries. It gets involved, and that's the other thing that's lost on this whole immigration argument, because they'll go and mess up other countries. They'll install these dictators that are cruel to the people, so the people have to flee. And if they come and flee to the United States, then they get furious here in the United States. If we take some responsibility for all of these atrocities we do abroad, and it's just not. And like you said, like this refusal to cooperate, and it's the patriarchal system. We need more of a matriarchal type approach to things, more
Yeah, but
cooperation. We all
share, yeah. You
yeah,
need a dude to do this. You need a female to do this. You need certain people with this experience to do that. You need certain with this people to do this. I mean, we need each other. I don't know why it's just this and that. So black and white weirdness. Okay,
but it
before
yeah,
we go, I just saw that King Ray ask a question that I've been curious about because I heard that
mm,
there was some tape released this week, and there's some rumors
oh
that
boy,
uh, that Trump might be a homosexual or not homosexual. Experiments with everybody. Is that
yeah,
apparently everybody? Is this true? I don't know what's going on. What's the rumor?
yeah. Well, that's that kind of thing is really unfortunate, and that's another thing when you don't have a healthy approach to sexuality, right? Like these guys. And it's like it used to be like in Victorian England, they invented tablecloths because they thought men would be aroused by the table legs. That was a thing. It's like
Seriously? I didn't
yeah,
know
and
that.
it's like well, like sexuality is a strong thing, and it's like what arouses you. It's like okay, arousal
Ankles.
just happened, and it's like not something you totally control, and it's like okay, that's an attractive woman, but then if you're filled with self-loathing, if you're like oh that's a man, and it's like then they become hateful and violent. That's just not healthy. It's why I was like, oh, well, that's an attractive man. That's okay. That stirs feelings in me too. What's the big deal? And so it's just like I think you see that. You see this a lot on the right where they always say there's that self-hatred because they just don't know what to do with their feelings. They don't know what to do with arousal. They've been told over and over again. And that's another very powerful emotion. Guilt is a powerful emotion, human arousal, human sexuality. And if somebody
That
doesn't
part.
guide you, if somebody doesn't, yeah, if somebody doesn't guide you through that, honestly saying, this is okay, that's okay, and let you choose, what you like in your world, they push you into this thing they make you think the natural feelings that are coming out of you are somehow evil or dirty. That's cruel. That's a cruel thing and it leads to violence. And that's just a part of the right. So, I mean, I don't like to, I think what he is, he's a victim of that suppressed sexuality of the right. They use that to manipulate people and it destroys lives. So that's what I think's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Gosh, Walter, I could talk to you all night. You always have the best things to talk about. I hope you come on next week and we can talk more with Melissa.
Yeah, I haven't seen her in a while, so that'll be wonderful. I like these opportunities but it's been a delight to talk to you. I like your approach to thing. Your angle is always gives me new ideas, so I think that's really valuable. I
I know
appreciate it.
you had me thinking all week since we talked the last time. So yeah, I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to doing this again.
that ego death model. I'm gonna have to read on that some more. There's something there that I got to figure out.
I'm going to look up some more about it too because I don't know a lot about it. I mean, like I said, my psychology is highly specialized. I'm kind of in this one little area, so I've
Yeah,
been just looking around trying to see all this other stuff and see how it relates because I really am more interested in seeing our behavior across everybody. Now that we're a global community, I think a lot of things are going to change
yeah, I
because
think
we
so.
can't, like you were talking about earlier, how we just sort of kind of move on and just like deal with what, like each generation kind of doesn't learn from the last and is like reinventing the wheel each time. I think now that we're a global community and there's stuff on the internet, we have access to so much information. I just don't see us as a race sticking with that model anymore.
Yeah, there's too much
Hopefully.
curiosity, and people have too much access to information now, and I don't think it can be suppressed. They let the genie out of the bottle, can't be put back in.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of, I'm pretty sure Trump is on Kasunla. Hold on. I was going to pull this up. Kisunla is a drug for Alzheimer's and dementia, and
Yeah,
it's
okay. I heard that.
administered. It's an IV drug, so that's probably why he has this bruising on his hand. And it requires mandatory MRI monitoring because it carries a risk of serious side effects known as amyloid-related imaging abnormalities, which involve brain swelling and brain bleeding. So the term blood clot is very relevant because certain blood thinning medications can increase the risk of this bleeding, and some of the symptoms of ARIA or ARIA, whatever it's called, are headaches, confusion,
Yeah,
dizziness, vision changes, gait difficulty, which we've seen him drag his leg,
yeah,
and seizures. So I'm pretty sure he's that, which means he is being treated for dementia or early Alzheimer's.
yeah, yeah.
And
We're very
these are the
about
side
that.
effects of his medicine. Good night,
Yeah,
Courtney.
yeah. Vileness, being treated for. If only there was a treatment for vileness, but we got to
I
figure out. All
know.
we can do is figure out our response. And I guess if we're armed, the more we're armed with, like this ego model, or the way things we can say, or. But yeah, stand up for yourselves, people. Set boundaries and cut the toxic people out of your life to whatever extent you can. Take care of yourselves
Yes.
first, second, and third. That's important.
Yes, I agree, Walter. You guys, thanks for coming in tonight. I really appreciate all y'all being here. And for all of you who donated to my cause, I cannot thank you enough. Literally, I'm going to send you each thank you note. So I'm so grateful. Anyway, this was a great conversation, and I hope we'll do this again next week.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
you guys, have a good weekend. Bye,
Bye.
everybody. If it will